Jesi milostivi čovekoljubiv Bog i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods on high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems, giants walking, angels and demons fight, only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time the tales unfold, mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold, from valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Welcome to myth, mysteries and majesty. Study with us and don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy and horror, from dungeons and dragons to Skyrim and Mordor. The powers haunt the evening in gothic castles where they're screaming. Wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep of the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Mysteries and majesty is the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
Since the 1980s, Great Britain has been shaken by the paranormal case of William Bill Ramsey, who believed that since he was a child that he was different, and he was going through a series of seizures and these weird feelings of turning into a wolf throughout his whole life, that he was ashamed of sharing with others, and that he had almost no control over this paranormal event. So what happens when Bill faces his maybe even last hope and last moments of his life, and by some, let's say, divine intervention, the most famous paranormal investigators of the USA get in touch with Bill and decide to help him. So welcome to our latest episode where we'll be talking about this, like I said, very exciting supernatural case of William Bill Ramsey, and the story that came out several decades ago in Great Britain and became popular even in the United States. And if you check different platforms and sources online, if you just Google, supposedly this is a true story, and of course we don't know because we weren't there, but we're gonna dissect it as if the narrative is true and just enjoying this story about a man turning into a wolf that he thought was brought to him by curse. So our goal is to investigate, was this curse or something else? Shaun, when you were dealing with the story, when you were preparing for this week, what were your impressions over overall story when it comes to narrative, when it comes to the plot, when it comes to eyewitnesses, when it comes to throughout the whole book we have several interviews being conducted with one was a cop, one was occasionally Bill's wife, then Ed and Lorraine, who later in the later part of the book jumping in Bill's life, trying to help him and interview him. How do you see the whole story? How trustworthy is it?
Well, I mean, we really can't tell how trustworthy the story is because we're getting it all from one source, right? It's a collection of all of these different eyewitnesses, but all of that is contained in one source. And at least in the material that I was working with, it didn't necessarily prompt me to go and look at other sources outside. I'm sure if you did research, you could find some if they exist. But we're just gonna, for tonight's episode, just treat this as if it really happened, because that's the way that the story unravels within the book, is that it's explaining it as though this was something that everyone believed actually happened. And so, as we normally do on these episodes, we like to bring a little bit of skepticism, but also we kind of just kind of think about it like, what would happen if? What do we say about this if it did happen? And so with this particular instance, I'm a little bit more confident that it did happen than I am in some of the other episodes that we've done, where some of the stuff, not necessarily the Ed and Lorraine Warren stuff, but some of the other stuff that we've done, looking at like folklore and stuff like that. With that stuff, you never really know you're dealing with something hundreds of years ago. With this is something that was pretty recent, and then the book was written just a decade after the events supposedly transpired. And the one of the co-authors of the book, Will Ramsey, is actually the subject of the book, and so you can't really get much closer to a primary source than that.
Yeah, thanks for that. So let's start with the story. By the way, I have included the Amazon link to the book that I read for this week, so you can, enjoy the book and buy it for yourself. It's a fast read, it's an easy read, and you'll enjoy many details of the story. So it was December of 1983, and we're going back to the region of Essex in England, where a nurse was just standing outside the hospital, and she opened the door of the clinic, and she looked in, and then she spotted a man outside the hospital, and his appearance was different, was shocking, was frightening, and of course she, when you see something like that, especially late at night, it just leaves something, it changes the way you perceive reality, and it makes you think, could there be something else or something different out there? And my mind goes immediately to the Twilight Zone, even though Twilight Zone, especially the original ones, they were made way before I was born. But I can only imagine that people who witnessed this in the early 80s, for them, Twilight Zone wouldn't be that old. So they were like, oh, my mind immediately goes to something supernatural that will be shown in this great TV show. So this unusual man of weird appearance approached the nurse, and he said, I have to tell you what's happening to me. And he was ashamed to even say what's on his mind, but he had to, because he was literally begging for help. He was like, lady, I'm turning into a wolf. And I mean, imagine if someone would tell you something like this, you were like, man, like, what did you take? Like, this is not regular alcohol. Like, let me help you, but not by you turning into a wolf. Let me see if we can, if you want to spend the night in the hospital, or maybe, asylum or something like that. So the nurse stood there in disbelief, like she was shocked. Like, what do you do when someone approaches you and tells you something like that? And of course, you will be a skeptic like all of us. And then suddenly she started hearing this deep rumbling growl traveling from man's chest into his throat and coming out. And she was like, whoa, a human being cannot make this sound. This reminds me of a wolf. And then this man started transforming in front of a nurse. It is said that his lips pulled back over his teeth. His eyes were crazed. Before she knew what was happening, the man was lashing out with one of his claw hands. So he started, changing. He started transforming. He struck her with a force so violent that she was slammed into the wall, and the back of her head smashing into the plaster so hard that she slipped into unconsciousness. No matter how often, um, once when the staff of the hospital surrounded him and tried to uh, you know uh, fight with him. So no matter how often and hard they tried to strike him, even kicking him, a few times, he didn't do anything. He didn't even fall on the floor. Instead, he swiped at them with his powerful claw-like hands, like they were nothing. And then the orderly, he came and he ran down the hall and told the doctor what was happening. The doctor, who often had to subdue drunks in the emergency ward, got his trusty hypodermic. He put 3 cc's of Thorazine in it, and then he went to follow the orderly and see what is happening. Where's this crazy noise coming from this section of the hospital? And then Bill, who turned into Wolfman, according to the story, he grabbed the elderly, he lifted him up several inches off the floor, and then hurled him back into the wall. The orderly just was trying to duck a punch that the Wolfman had thrown when the doctor finally managed to stick the needle into the Wolfman's right buttock and inject this fluid instantly. But the transformation from man to wolf was chillingly complete. You would think, well, was this too late? Was the doctor a little bit too late? Could it have tried to inject with a needle a little bit earlier? So everything about this man suggested that there was a perfect fusion between a man and an animal. He wasn't maybe your mere regularly orthodox looking werewolf that you see, in movies or comics. Yet he didn't look like a regular man like me and you either. He was a fusion of both. And when people would see him, they would see like there's still traces of something humane inside him, yet his eyes are different. His nose is different. His fingers are different. And not to even mention, he's now dealing with this supernatural strength. Like, what is this? Who is this creature? But thankfully, eventually, Thorazine started functioning and dealing in this wolfsman in Bill's bloodstream. So as Thorazine took over, the wolfman began slowly to sink onto the floor, and then he finally collapsed. Soon, the rest of the world will be joining the doctor in asking the same question about who is Mr. Bill Ramsey. That's the introduction of the whole story. And again, it started in a hospital when Bill just couldn't wait, asking for help. That's the beginning of the story in the book, but not actually the very beginning of everything that was happening in poor man's life. Because as he was born, like we said, in Southend-on-Sea area in England, he was having supposedly an idyllic life. He was having a good family. There was nothing remarkable about him. People wouldn't pay much attention to him. He wasn't like an extraordinary kid or weird. I mean, in a way, we're all weird, but he wasn't that much different. In 65, he married his sweetheart, Abby. They had 3 children. But sometimes during all of this, his dreams began. And this is where it started getting weird. But the dreams were not simple. And we all have nightmares. But what Bill was going through weren't simply nightmares. For example, his wife was standing at the kitchen sink on a sunny spring morning, washing the dishes. He approached her from behind and called her name aloud. She turned around to face him, and she was smiling, glad to see her husband. But her smile vanished instantly, and she began screaming, covering her eyes, and yelling so loudly that he was forced to flee the kitchen. He had become some kind of a monster. That's why she was screaming. He had this dream many times in the mid-60s, and he just couldn't get rid of those. They were a young couple, and everything seemingly was perfect in their marriage. So he couldn't just help himself wondering, like, why do I have these constant nightmares, same nightmares, where my wife can't stand me, where she sees me, she's yelling, she's running away from me. What is wrong with me? And in his dream, at least not in the beginning, he couldn't see himself to realize into what he was changing. And of course, it wasn't even on his mind yet that these dreams were like a sort of a premonition of what would happen, not just to him, but to his wife, Abby. And this was the beginning of hell in their marriage. And I'll stop here because I don't want to talk, without allowing you to comment. What are your thoughts so far? Does the beginning of the story of Bill and his wife Abby sound like, hey, there was nothing, special about them, but look what started happening with them? Is there something about this story that makes you like want to flip pages and continue reading?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're going through that, I mean, obviously, when you were given that, tasty morsel at the beginning of the wolfman, in the hospital, um, that's something that really gets the imagination going, and you're like, yeah, I can't wait to get there. Um, but also, this dream that he has of he's approaching his wife. He comes up behind her and he says her name, and she turns around and the smile drops from her face and she's horrified. I think that that's something that a lot of us can relate to, right? Even those of us who are married, who are in a relationship and have been for a long time, have that little piece of doubt that you hold, like, if they knew me, the real me, they couldn't love me, right? Um, and so I think that that's a human experience, despite the fact that he's fighting with this animal. I think all of us can kind of relate to that. And so, yeah, not only do I like it because um he's sharing this dream that really kind of foreshadows things to come later in the book, but it's also just super relatable, as a person, that you know there's something monstrous in you that you know you fight it, you hide it, you're ashamed of it, um, but the blood of Adam courses through our veins, right? And so there is something monstrous in each of us.
And that actually perfectly blends in what I was about to say. Bill became so aware and so self-conscious and so ashamed of himself, as if he would want to harm his wife. And he kept it to himself for the long time because, like, hey, especially back in those days in the 60s, are you kidding me? I mean, psychology was getting perfected. Uh, I mean, even until recently, people going to therapies were a taboo, especially for men, because you have to be strong. You're the head of the family. You can't show any weakness. Like, who to tell? People would mock you. So Bill was keeping this inside himself. And then a year and a half later, this dream started showing up again. And it was a freezing snowstorm in England. And he just woke up one night and there was darkness, just darkness around his bed. And of course, his wife was sleeping by him. And at first, he was confused. He was like wondering, why did he just wake up so abruptly? He couldn't remember. He even considered the possibility that he was dreaming. So now he thought that he is aware in his dream, which is very cool, like dreaming that I'm dreaming. And then he heard this low animal rumbling there in the darkness. And this is something similar that we heard from the beginning of the story, where he later in his life went for help and approached this nurse in the hospital. So some kind of a beast crouched in the shadow of the room, ready to strike. Bill didn't understand yet that this beast was coming from his belly, that this unnatural sound was coming from inside of him. He was hearing this sound, but he thought actually that someone broke in their apartment and there's a wild animal about to attack his wife and him. So, of course, what do you do in that moment? You're sleeping, you just woke up. It's the middle of the night. You're frozen, you're scared. And then the sound come again, the rumbling. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is coming from my chest. He thought, so now he was thinking of his old nightmare, the previous nightmare from a year and a half ago, watching his wife turn where she would be screaming. And then he thought about these rumbling noises again. They will be just traveling from his belly, then to his chest, and then to his throat. They will always go that way. So then he was thinking, well, could this be what actually scared my wife in the dream? He was just trying to connect these two events and, try to give them a meaning. Later in his life, when Bill was first interviewed about, his life and these supernatural or paranormal events in his life and these strange occurrences that he couldn't explain, I'm just going to read a couple of things from the interview because there are several interviews throughout the whole book. There's no way we're going to read all of them. So I'm just going to read a couple of interesting things. He was asked if he was violent. He says, no, not really. Just like, every other kid. And then the question is, so the first time you felt the sensation of changing into an animal, did you feel violent then? And then he said, oh, absolutely, I did. But that was frightening because it came so subtly, and I had all these dark thoughts and dark desires to do evil, to hurt other people, and it's like they didn't even come from me. And then the interviewer asked him, well, when you look back over the years in your life, can you see one very special day in your life? And he was like, oh, I think I do. The day when I was playing in the backyard. So the interviewer said, well, what was so special about you playing in the backyard? Well, I changed completely. My mom said so as well, even though she had no idea what was happening. She said that I became a very different boy, that where I being, happy-go-lucky, now I had withdrawn and being edgy about, things. So the interview keeps asking, say, well, were you aware of what was happening to you that day? Well, not exactly. I mean, he was a kid, how much a kid can understand. If he, as an adult, can understand what's happening, how much a kid can understand. He said, I didn't understand anything, but I think something entered my soul, something that didn't belong there. So this was actually the beginning, the most unfortunate and most important, unfortunately, day in his life, at least when it comes to the story of him turning into a wolfman, because as he said, something entered his soul. Now, we'll read a little bit later, he's coming from a religious home. He considered himself to be a Christian, not the perfect one. We'll see throughout the story that he would drink and get drunk occasionally as an adult. But the kid was just minding his own business, playing in the backyard. He wasn't playing with the Ouija board. He wasn't summoning demons. So there's a question, well, how can even something so nefarious like the movie, right, enter a kid's innocent soul and just possess him and make him turn into an animal? It's like, surely this cannot happen. Surely this is something that we can see only in movies. I mean, after all, Bill was only 9 years old. And Bill loved playing alone very often. Maybe he was an introvert like man. And then Bill was asked, like, well, have you ever walked into a meat locker? No, he was asked how this, to describe the sensation that he felt when he was first starting feeling different and when the spirit would take over. And then Bill is saying to people who are asking him questions, he said, well, have you ever walked into a meat locker right after you've been outside on a hot day? So imagine you're sweating, you're so hot, and then you suddenly enter a room that is so cold, so chill. He said, that's how I felt it. My body temperature suddenly dropped 20 degrees. Sweat froze on me, and my whole body started shaking. It was as if I had opened this door and stepped inside to another dimension or something like that. And there was this odor, very, very foul smell. A few years earlier, a sewer on our street had backed up, he said. He said, I never smell anything as foul as the gases that escaped. And that's what this smell was like that afternoon. I was afraid I was going to vomit. And I'll stop here because, Shaun, the mother of all questions is how can an innocent child coming from a religious family be even possessed? And second thing, I heard from people who've been dealing with supernatural and who had many stories of dealing with spiritual warfare, telling me something similar. Not only the temperature drops, we mentioned that a million times on the podcast, but they would tell me that many times around demons, there's this foul smell like sulfur. I remember one lady specifically telling me this at my work, and if I ever see her again, I owe her apology. I remember her telling me stuff, something like this. You can smell demons; they smell like rotten eggs or something like that, like sulfur. I'm like, that's not biblical. I was one of those people. If it's not in the Bible, it's not true. Nothing is true if it's not in the Bible. But then these things confirm themselves so many times throughout eyewitness reports, in the whole world when people are dealing with demonic. There's like, it's not just temperature. It's not just you feel like someone is watching you. There's this foul smell that you cannot imitate. So first, if you maybe want to address briefly, how can a innocent child coming from a religious family that is not opening the door to the occult being possessed? And the second thing, what is it about this sulfur smell and the demon world?
Well, if you remember the last Fantastic Friday episode we did with Emma Schmidt, right? She was a faithful Catholic, going to mass multiple times a week, receiving the Eucharist as often as she could, um, and she was possessed. Um, so I think our problem is we have a preconception that a Christian can't be demonized, and we will go for justification for that to, Jesus talking about binding the strong man and plundering his house. And if the Holy Spirit possesses this place, then how is Satan going to be able to go in there? I think that we often forget that in Job, Satan entered the throne room of God. um like, we forget that Satan was so brave that he grabbed Jesus and took him up to a high place to tempt him. Like, it's not this idea that if God's dwelling in a place, evil can't be there. That's just not biblical. It's just not. So I think that we have these false preconceptions, um, and I think a lot of it is based on the ad hoc justification that they did during the Reformation. As a continuationist, um, I'm sure that you can appreciate, and our viewers also, uh, that when Martin Luther was trying to justify uh, his claims of what he thought was theologically accurate versus what the church was saying, one of their apologetics that the Catholic Church used is, "Where's your miracles? Right? Where are your saints?" And so Martin Luther kind of came up with this justification that, well, it's okay that we don't have them because they don't happen anymore. Um, God doesn't move in that way anymore. It's kind of the first time in history that that was ever dogmatically proclaimed. I mean, there had been periods of time where it's like, oh, it's a little quiet. Where's God moving? Is he doing something? Augustine even asked if God still performs miracles. And I think it's in The City of God where he kind of starts out saying, oh, yeah, God, I really don't see God doing this. Towards the end of the book, he's like, oh, yeah, no, we decided to start keeping track and we had like 1,000 miracles in 2 years. Um, so, it's one of those things. But, I do think that it's kind of a continuation of that cessationist view that, well, if we don't need to have miracles in order to verify our theological claims, then it doesn't bother us that there are no miracles. If we don't need an exorcist with the authority from the bishop to be able to perform these rites, because they don't have them in Protestantism, well, then, we'll just say that Christians can't be possessed. And there you go. That rules that out. Very easy ad hoc justification. It's not biblical. Um, it's not Christian. In Christian history, the people who were all fighting with demons were all Christians, right? In the Bible times, you see it happening with Jews and Gentiles alike. But in Christian history, the people who needed deliverance were people who were born and baptized Christian. Um, so I think it's just, I don't want to say funny. It's not funny. It's sad that we have to put the theological cart before the horse and say, well, yeah, a Christian can't be demonized. I think that that's probably done a lot of damage, because if you're someone who believes that, and you're not part of the um, the charismatic circles where they know that a Christian can be demonically attacked because they experience it, right? The people who come up for deliverance are Christians. Um, so they experience it. They have that on their side, where they don't care about what those stodgy theological texts say. They live it. They have a life where they walk in concert with God. So they're not concerned about what the people in the ivory towers are going to say about theology, because you know those people are philosophizing. It's abstract to them. For the charismatics, it's practical. It's on the ground. And so I think that if you don't happen to be blessed to go to a church like that, and you're somebody who does get demonized, you will have to wrestle with the question, am I a Christian? And that's sad. That's sad, because that's how theology can hurt people.
Thanks for that. So going back to Bill Ramsey's story when he was a kid, and he's remembering when he was 9, and he's recalling this strange coldness that entered his body. But it wasn't just coldness. Suddenly he became angry. There was this rage that was overtaking him. It was so blinding. He didn't want it. But it was so it was so strong. He couldn't reject it. He couldn't repel it. He was a boy. He couldn't fight it. And again, these images of a wolf and him turning into one start coming back to his mind. So as we go through the story, there'll be several patterns that follow him from childhood to his um, adult life as a middle-aged guy. And many times when he would be possessed by this werewolf or wolfman spirit, there'll be several similar details that will follow him. So this is interesting if you like paying attention. This is one of them: coldness, rage, and him visualizing or getting images from whatever source would be, we would say demonic, how he actually can see through the eyes of a wolf, and he's actually becoming wolf and just roaming around and hurting people. And that night, when he was 9, when his mom called him from inside the house to come in, her voice sounded differently to his ears. He noticed, wow, my mom's voice is irritating. And that was never happening before to Bill. I mean, sure, we can all be upset with our parents, just like parents get upset with kids, but that's not the point. This is different context. This is different level of being irritating with your own parent. And he was like, "Why is she even calling me? I can take care of myself. I'm 9. Who is she to call me like that and tell me what to do?" Whoa, he wasn't behaving like that before. He was a good son. And as these thoughts were coming to his mind, the rage was also advancing. And then he started coming to the house. And when he was walking, he caught the toe of his shoe against the fence post. He tripped and fell to the ground. He turned to the fence post, which had been dug and planted deep into the ground, and tore it from its moorings so violently that dirt and grass were flung all the way up on the back porch. Seeing this, his mom got horrified and she called the father to come and help her. And as they came, outside to the back porch to see what's happening, Bill, only 9 again, he was full of rage. They couldn't recognize their beloved sweet boy. Now, they're comparing and saying that even three adult men, will have hard time getting the fence post from the ground. Yet Bill, little Billy, 9 years old, had done it simply and brutally. I know he stood swinging the post over his head, and it was like a toothpick or like a, let's say, baseball bat. No biggie. He can do it. Where does a boy of that age and that stature, he wasn't big for his age. He wasn't bigger than kids of his age. Where is someone like him getting strength from? What is the source? What is the source of this rage and of this energy, of this powerful paranormal strength coming? And then he fell to his knees and began ripping into the wire fencing with his hands. He pulled the fencing to his teeth and began tearing it apart with them. His father became terrified just like his spouse. So he tried to pull his son to his feet, but he was having a difficult time. The boy's strength was incredible, man. Incredible. And his parents got scared of their son. And because that caused grieving to his mom's heart, she started crying. And when Bill heard his mom sobbing and just crying, that emotionally and mentally affected him so that he relented, and this anger started departing slowly, and he just slowly got back to who he was, a sweet, innocent 9-year-old kid who was always listening to his parents. And all Bill could feel was this peculiar coldness. However, as the rage was leaving and his mom was crying, the demonic in him started fighting back, pushing back. No, we're going to do something. They cannot treat you this way, right? So the rage started coming back out of blue, and Bill didn't want that. He didn't plan that. He turned to them and thinking he was about to say something reassuring to his mom, but then he was full with rage again. And then another image of a wolf came to his mind, and a growl started coming from his belly and filled his chest and bursted out of his mouth. And his mother and father turned, and when they heard that and saw that, it was like, that's not our son. They ran back inside the house. And on the back porch, his mother tripped. His father bent to pick her up, and when he did so, he looked back at his son, a 9-year-old son, and thought he saw a wolf, because the boy was going through a full transformation. And eventually, the roaring quieted, and Bill began to feel the rage leave his body, and not temporarily like 5-10 minutes ago. Thankfully, this was, at least for this time being, it was permanent. Coldness left, all the symptoms left, and he was back to be normal. But later, as his mom served them dinner, she found herself noticing that Bill changed in some ways physically. He just wasn't the same person anymore, and mother can usually tell the difference. This transformation to a wolf boy and going back to a regular boy left some physical marks on his body. And now the interview is going back with Bill Ramsey. New set of questions are coming. And they said, well, Bill, you said in a different interview that you were able to forget what happened that day when you were just 9 years old. How was that possible? Because now you're recollecting that memory, but all your life you're just putting that back. He says, I knew that I needed to forget this experience. And they're like, but why is that? Because I felt that if I thought about it very often, it might happen to me again. I may turn into someone or something again, and I may hurt people I love. And they ask him, do you mean anger? Yes, the anger. It's not just anger, it's the whole state of mind. This is something like I never experienced before. I was a new person, a different person. It wasn't me. It was like this out of body experience. Imagine astral projections. You're like observing from the bird's eye perspective what's happening to you. You have no control over yourself. You're a mere spectator, because just like Shaun said, if the strong man occupies your body, your soul, your you, and you're weaker than the strong man because you have no power authority in Jesus' name to fight back, then you're left to the mercy of God coming and delivering you. You're basically a prisoner in your own soul, in your own mind. So Bill said back then, in that backyard, when I was 9, when I almost hurt my parents, and when I was just throwing that post down, that it would take 3 people to do that, 3 adult people. I saw myself doing all of these things, and I saw everything, but it wasn't me. So this is that part of Bill's life, sad part of his life when he was still learning who he was as a child. And then this continues in his adult life. He said that usually these things happen by night, these transformations. He says, and these can be very often autumn nights that are where the moon is full. And I know people say that's a cliche, but this was supposed Bill's report. And when the wolf's bane blooms, then the change overtakes him. So when I was googling the wolfsbane, it's a beautiful purple flower, and it says that in the legends and lores of many Western nations, wolfsbane was used as a tool to protect yourself against vampires and werewolves. So, what are your thoughts on these circumstances that would trigger him, turning? So it wasn't just the wolfsbane, it wasn't just autumn, it wasn't just full moon. It was all of these things. That doesn't mean that the turning transformation couldn't happen any other season, but this was like the best time, the best season for him to turn into something or someone he didn't want to. So, what is it about moon? What is it about the atmosphere? What is it about the weather? What is it about the pressure? What is it about the temperature that would, if someone is possessed or overtaken by a demon, demonized, what would it be that there's a certain time of the year where the demon would find this weather to be the best so you can fully possess a human being and go into a full rampage?
Well, if we think about it from, a demonic possession point of view, maybe it doesn't have a lot of touch points there because, with demonic possession, you think about, somebody having an aversion to holy symbols and things like that. Like, what does this have to do with it? But if we take a step back and remember what Paul says about the demons, right? That the gods of the nations are demons. Now, remember that the pagan nations were obsessed with the cycles of the moon and the seasons. So, can you imagine a pagan tribe somewhere who has a certain ritual when the moon is full? It's after the autumnal equinox. The wolf's bane is blooming, and they say that their god is going to choose a vessel, and we're going to offer a sacrifice to it. I think that that is something that you could absolutely see. I think that what we're dealing with in this demon is actually something like one of the ancient animistic gods, um, where you would have, like I said, once a year at this time, the deity is going to choose a vessel, and there would be a group of priests that have all been touched by the deity, and one of them will be chosen, and the sacrifice will be given. And yeah, I could totally see that as a thing. So when you put it in that context, and remember that Paul's the one who creates that bridge between demons and gods, that we're on fairly safe biblical ground here to say, yeah, this is probably one of the ancient pagan gods.
Yeah. So as Bill was growing up, and thankfully he didn't have this unfortunate and scary events of being, feeling possessed and turning into a wolf or a wolfman and showing these characteristics not just mentally but also physically. They will come and go. Sometimes there'll be like a couple or few years, between the incidents. So once there was October, Bill was working in a cleaning industry. It was a night full of harvest moons and foggy moors, and for no reason that Bill could understand, at least not at that point, he found himself waking up in the middle of the night and going to the window just to look out what's outside. And then he saw the full moon and he was staring at it. It's like being mesmerized. And then this cold chill started coming again through his body as he was standing there at the window. And again, images of wolves start flashing across his mind as he was staring at the moon. He told himself that he had been under great stress, and because of the economy that was happening, to England back then in 60s and 70s, he was simply suffering from delusions. Man, he just needs a hobby. He needs friends. He needs to chill. He needs to sleep more. Um, what is this nonsense with wolf? There are no wolfmen. There are no werewolves. He says he was trying to tell himself this is all nonsense. He's simply tired and he's so much stressed because he was taking care of his whole family. At some point, he will even work two jobs, just like you, Shaun. So I hope because when you're tired and exhausted and sleeping few hours a night, you won't dream that you're turning into a wolf because then we'll have to make a podcast about you one day. Just kidding, of course.
Absolutely.
You already have half the looks, so it's like it's not that implausible. It may happen. So he was like, yeah, this is all nonsense. I'm not a killer. And then he told himself, I'm a peaceful, God loving Christian. So, like, me turning into a wolf? No, God's my back. I'm paraphrasing, but this is what he would tell himself to calm himself down. Another evening, he was helping his wife with some late night groceries, and Bill drove past a church. It was a familiar church, one that he would pass often by. But that night, as he was seeing the church against the full moon, as clouds raced across the sky, the spires seemed majestic. It's like, ooh, it's almost like in one of those movies or novels when seeing such a beautiful, um, you know, background that you would like, or if you would want to install wallpaper on your computer if you see something like that. So it really looked like out of this world. But this effect on Bill was profound. He couldn't articulate how and why, but he had this sense that God was with him and that God would take care of him. And this brought some comfort. I mean, of course, it would bring to all of us. He was like, yeah, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. I'll be okay. However, throughout the coming throughout the coming days, this image of him being a wolf kept coming back. And again, it was still, full autumn moon. Bill's friends, Jeremy and Scott, proved to be very reliable workers. Sometimes, after work, these three men would get together and get some drinks after work. Now, it's getting a little bit scary. So one night they stayed a little bit longer after their shift. They had a lot to work, and they stopped in a public house to get some beer. And Bill was like, guys, give me some time going to the washroom. He finished his business. He was washing his hands, and then he saw himself in the mirror, and he saw an image of a wolf. It's almost like a wolf staring at you, but there's no wolf behind you. It's only you looking in the mirror. And again, you're in a sort of a pub, and you're like, wow. It's like, am I seeing right? Am I being? But yes, I had beer, but I'm not that drunk. So it's like image of a wolf in the mirror. Like, that's weird. So they left the bar and they start driving back home, and it was Bill's car. It's been like 30 minutes, and Bill felt this strange urge that he couldn't fight back when it came to these images hitting his mind. I clearly see it as a spiritual war. It's like you're being bombarded with this. To some people, it could be like in his mind, it could be aggression, it can be anger. To some of us, it could be lust, it can be vengeance, it can be literally anything when Satan is bombarding your mind. So Bill suddenly felt this urge to grab Jeremy, one of his two friends, in the car and to hurt him badly. And then wolf image started becoming more real in Bill's mind. And he was like, oh my God, I'm feeling this cool, chill feeling again in my body. And based on his experience so far in his life, when this sudden coolness comes and anger mixed with wolf image in his mind, he was like, oh no, this is not good. Oh no. And full moon, oh no. All the symptoms, all the details that would lead him towards him becoming someone who doesn't want to be and hurting others. All of them were there. And he was like, I'm stuck in a car with two of my friends, with two of my coworkers. So he was trying this impulse, like, I don't want to think about the wolf. I don't want to hurt anyone. No, these are my friends. That's not me. So he was praying inside of himself. He was thinking about that church and imagery, like, oh, that's comforting. God got my back. Everything will be okay. I'm a man of God. Not perfect again. He would drink here and there, but overall, he wasn't a bad guy. So he was like, God, please help me. And then the noise started coming from his belly more and more loud, and then traveling again to his chest and to his throat. And you can't stop it. You can't. And then it left his mouth. And his two friends heard it because, again, how can you not hear it? Because they're all in the same car. And they're like, what the heck is wrong with you, Bill? They became worried, of course, and afraid. And then as Jeremy started looking at him and he was afraid, like, what the heck is happening to Bill? Bill suddenly rushed to hurt him. The attack lasted 5 full minutes. Bill's hand assumed again a claw-like grasp, and terrifying growls and howls began coming from his mouth. Jeremy called out for help from his other friend, Scott. Scott managed to pull over the car to the side, trying to break the fight between the two of them. And in the shadows, because it was dark outside, Bill's head and hand looked differently. They couldn't see everything, but they saw glimpses of a person that is not their friend. It's like, this is not a regular human being. What's up with your head? What's up with your hand? You have claws? Where's it coming from? And your teeth? They look very different. And then Scott said to his friend Jeremy, get away from him. So it took several minutes for Scott and Jeremy to subdue Bill. They pushed him into the corner of the car and held him there until they could see that he was starting finally after a while to calm down. And the glint in his eye eventually faded. His bare teeth disappeared back behind his lips. And his curled hands straightened into normal fingers again. So he was transforming back into his humanhood, if I can use that word. And then because he was embarrassed, he was aware of what happened. And Bill screamed at his friends, let me out of here. I want to leave the car. Open the door. And of course, they had to allow him. So he went out in the forest. He had to spend time a little bit with himself, walking, thinking. And then he came back to his friends. And they're like, man, are you okay? He said, oh yeah, I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be okay? And then he told them, oh, that was alcohol playing tricks on all of us. So he told his friends that things were not real and they were just fears and fantasies that they had. And he was actually not trying to injure Jeremy. It was just like an aggressive play mixed with alcohol. You know, things happen. No biggie. Everything is normal. We're friends. And after a while, Bill was having a breakfast at his home. So he was trying to explain to Abby finally when he when he became courageous, because again, he was hiding this from his wife. He wanted to confess to Abby what was happening, and he told her the story. And then, of course, he's waiting for her response. And he said, like, well, what do you think? And Abby said, well, I do worry that you actually think that you're turning into a wolf. And she said, honey, I'm just scared that this stress is killing you. Not just that you work this full-time job, but even after the job, you do extra jobs and side jobs and you help people. You need to rest more because you have to start taking some evenings off, like see what's happening with your mind. And his wife, as we'll hear throughout the whole story, oh my gosh, that's a wife you wish for. She never left him. I don't want to spoil what's happening and what's coming soon. She never left him, regardless of who he was becoming and what he was able to do to others. She always believed that there's true, original, genuine, good guy Bill hiding behind this persona, this wolfman persona that he was becoming. So I just want to say thank God for women like Abby who always stood by him lovingly, forgivingly, and praying for him and encouraging. We all need someone like that in our life. So for the next year and a half, no incidents. Everything was happy, back to normal. And after a while, his coworkers are like, yeah, that was a while ago. He's a good guy, probably some stupid, silly incident. Things happen. I want to skip to the story and say when Bill, after a while, he was on his way back from work and it was late at night. And he now worked for the cab company. He wasn't anymore in the cleaning business. And the symptoms came back. He felt this hard pain in the middle of his chest. And as he was coming back from work, he had to pull his car over the curb because he thought he's having a heart attack. He's dying. He's gonna just his heart will explode. And as the pain was getting worse, his breathing got worse. And he was like, man, that's it. Cold sweat cover me. That's it. There's no hope for me. But then he did something to save his life. And I think we all have that instinct to preserve our life. He put car in gear and headed toward the nearby South End General Hospital. He went straight to the emergency room entrance. And by the time he reached the entrance, he was starting to feel the freezing sensation starting up his legs and spreading up his torso, his whole body. He thought again about his earlier wolf episodes that will come and go, come and go, come and go. And he was like, God, please help me. As he was entering the hospital looking for help, he doesn't want to hurt anyone, right? As he thought about hurting his wife and as he hurt one friend, he was like, I don't want to hurt anyone. But as soon as Bill opened the door, the nurses glanced up and saw him. And then this sensation came back in his belly. It almost felt like a strong gas pain. And again, it was moving from below his belly up. All the time the sensation moved, it gathered power. So it was becoming more powerful as it was traveling and trying to come out. So that when it reached his mouth, it was expressing such a roar that bounced off the walls and scared the hospital staff. And they said the echo was going for a good 2 minutes. I don't know if this is true, but it sounds as a good horror story. And the nurses jumped back. They're like, what the heck? Can a human being make this sound? So they look at Bill in terror. And Bill knew, he was aware that he started to change. It's like when you change, it's like he wants to stop it, but he can't. This is more powerful than him. And again, images of wolves start coming to his mind. He was like, that's it. He felt his hand begin to curl powerfully into these paw-like claws. Everything that would happen to him before, a couple of years ago, now start coming back again. And nurses didn't know what to do. They were like scared, and they gave him a pillow to lay down and relax. And he was like, okay, as he was fighting, trying to fight, he was like, as there was still this humane side of him. He was like, okay, let me try to lay down. Maybe I can somehow slow down this turning into a wolfman. But then the roars are coming back and snapped upwards once more, and rage come even more. So he grabbed the nurse's arm and dug his teeth into her arm, into flesh, just below the elbow. And of course, she screamed. The other nurse, finding her own courage, came at Bill and slapped him so hard that he suddenly let the other nurse go. But at first, he didn't let go of her at all. He kept hold of her bleeding arm. This iron-like, tart taste of blood, human blood, filled his mouth. He started feeling good because he didn't taste it before. Again, this is like watching horror movies. And then this time, the young policeman, thankfully, had dropped by the hospital for a cup of coffee in the emergency room. The screams of these two nurses came all through the hallway, so he heard the policeman, but he heard this animal sound like growling. So he thought actually that there was an animal in the hospital. So in his mind, the policeman was imagining this must be a crazy, just very strong, very big dog that somehow got his way into the hospital. But then when he entered the room with those two nurses, he saw Bill crouched in the corner with these wild looking features of his body, holding two nurses. The growls were actually coming from him, not from an animal. So the policeman pushed into the room, stepped over a chair that had been hurled and smashed against the wall. The closer he got to the man, the more the man growled. Bill couldn't stop himself. And the policeman, even though he was scared, he was like, "Sir, I just need to talk to you. I'm here to help you." But there was hatred again in Bill's eyes. He felt that these nurses, by calling for help, they betrayed him. How dare they betrayed him? So he picked up another chair that was close to him and he just flung it across the room. And the policeman said again calmly, "Sir, we're not here to hurt you. We want to just help you. Please, that's all." And then the man jumped at him. Bill jumped at him, grabbing the policeman's arm and trying to bite him. Just the same thing he did with the nurse. This low growl became even more chilling this time. The intern used the moment to get behind Bill. He got the man's right arm in hammerlock and shoved him towards the policeman. Grabbing the man by the shoulder, Bill, the policeman shoved him down onto the gurney. And quickly, two men lashed him into the cart with restraining straps. They both considered themselves lucky that they were not injured, and especially that Bill didn't manage to bite them. He was so strong that it took them several men to actually constrain him and put him where he was belonging now. And finally, the doctor was working late. He was summoned, like, "Hey, come and help us. We have issue with this wild man." And he came with Thorazine, with injection of Thorazine. 20 minutes later, after the Thorazine was injected, policeman is still trembling. He can't believe what's happening. He said, "Man, I think I saw a wolf." And then the policeman is asking the intern, like, "What the heck is happening with this guy?" But all the doctors, and including the intern, could have said was like shocked and said, "I wish I knew. We've never seen something like this before." And after a while, Bill became conscious again, and they started asking him his name. He was confused, like, "Where am I at? Like, what happened? Why am I cold? Why am I terrified?" And they asked him, "Wait, sir, you don't remember what happened?" He said, "No, I don't. I don't know any of you." And they're like, "Okay, just, the doctor will come and talk to you and, just tell you what's happening with you." And he said, "Well, what doctors?" "Well, you're going to the mental hospital at Runwell." And of course, Bill didn't want to go there because once when you enter a mental asylum, especially if you're in a small place, and again, we're talking about 60s and 70s, the whole town hears about you and your reputation is done. And it's like, how will it will be difficult to retain the same job or get a better job? What about losing friends and so many other things? Bill didn't want to lose, um, his reputation. And Ranwell was this huge mental asylum. It was a big institution. Um, and Bill said he couldn't still remember what he had done. He said, my mind was total chaos. He's like, I have no clue what happened. But he decided to go to the mental hospital to see what would the specialist say over there. He said, but then I started remembering the hospital from last night and the way the police had put my wrist in handcuffs. So the memory started coming back, but he was like, "Psh, you know, I'm remembering now, like almost 24 hours later." So he said, wow, it must have been pretty hard for the staff, including policemen, to handle me. And the mental doctor, the psychiatrist, I think he was a psychiatrist, agreed. And Bill shared about his embarrassment and that, you know, he was just asking if he doesn't have to stay in the hospital, in the mental hospital, because everyone will find out. He just wanted to go home. Said, I don't want to go. And then the doctor told him, listen, I have to warn you about something. And Bill said, yes, doctor. And doctor said, well, most probably this will happen again. And if it does, Bill, you know how and where to reach me. So please do that. And there's the first part, the end of the first part of the book, of the story. The book has three parts. And I'll stop here. Shaun, man, such a sad story, such a powerful, demonically inflicted sad story. What is it about all of these same symptoms that will happen with chill, with wolf-like images, with hatred, with anger, with full moon? I'm especially interested in these images that he would be bombarded. He would think of a wolf, and then later he would be turning into that. And of course, it makes me think if he would be not by himself, but with the power of Christ, his name and his authority, if he would be able to even repel the image, if transformation would be either stopped completely or it will be maybe happening with less frequency. Because if you would be fighting back in this spiritual warfare, but if you're fighting with your power, there's only a little bit of what you can do. What are your thoughts on the first, uh, the first third of the book and Bill's life?
Yeah, I'm thinking. So as I was working through the book, one of the thoughts that occurred to me is, the cold that he's feeling. That could either be, when we think about wolves, and especially when we think about them, specifically in North America. I'm not sure about, Europe, but specifically in North America, when you think about wolves, you think about the North and the tundra, and that's where you picture wolves running, especially the larger wolves, like the gray wolf. That's something that we think of, Alaska, Canada, that kind of thing. And so their home is the cold. They feel most free in the cold. Um, and so I wonder if that is, that could be a piece of it, as if that's like the calling card or like the homing beacon of the wolf. But then another thought occurred to me is I wonder if the cold that he's feeling is the loss of sensation, like he's losing control of his body. And so he's no longer feeling his nerve endings. He's no longer feeling in his body. And so the cold is not necessarily like a positive cold that's coming over him, but more, the absence of sensation. Um, and I'm not sure which one it is. So, kind of dealer's choice on that. Um, as far as the image of the wolf, I think that when the wolf is taking over, it he is being presented in his mind with the image of what it is that's controlling him. And so the wolf is either the wolf is showing him the wolf, or as he's moving to the back seat, as it were, of his body, what he's looking at, what he's seeing, is the wolf who's taking control. And so I think that's probably what that is. Um, as far as the moon and everything, I think that has more to do with, like the times and seasons that God put into place, and when He gave the power of dominion to certain of the angels, um, their power, I think, was in concert with the times and the seasons. That all these things work together for a good creation. And then when those angels fell, they maintained that power, and so they continued to have that certain authority in those times. So to me, that makes sense. And then what was the other question?
I forgot. It was 5 minutes ago. I don't know.
I'm sorry. Let me see if I can bring it up in my brain here. The
Well, yeah, it was basically most important about the symptoms that would follow him. Like it's not a coincidence. He will always feel the same time. I mean, it will always happen. Whenever it will happen, it will be the same symptoms. And like I was saying, especially that wolf imagery. And he wasn't even aware at that point that he could have been possessed. He was thinking, could it be cursed? That
yeah,
was his explanation to himself.
I remember your question. Do I think that if he were to invoke Christ, that it would stop the transformation? Um, and I think most probably, because as we see later in the book, or even looking back to that time with his mother, there are certain things that can, when there's a strong emotional appeal to Bill, he can kind of fight for the driver's seat. So I think that, instead of granting a strong emotional appeal to Bill, if you whack the wolf over the head with with the power of Christ, it makes the fight for the driver's seat a little easier. So I think that it's possible that invoking the name and the blood of Christ over that particular scenario, it probably would have an impact on the wolf transforming. I don't think necessarily that would be enough to deliver him from the wolf. Like I said, I mean, I equated him to an ancient god. I think this is a very powerful demon. Um, and so it would require, revocations, renunciations. And as far as we're aware, Bill didn't fall into any terrible sin prior to, I mean, he was 9 prior to getting possessed. So this would be something that would have to be kind of dug out of him. Um, but yeah, I think that invoking Christ could stop the transformation.
Okay, thanks. So we're switching to the second segment of the book. I think the last one, the third one, when it comes to exorcism, is the the quickest one. So a couple of years fast forward, it was January 1984. Well, actually, about a year after that. Bill was working as always. He was in a good mood, minding his own business, enjoying life, working hard, being there with, his friends, with his family. And one night, he got into his car and began driving um, through a light snow on his way home, and his mood started changing abruptly, like out of blue. There were no warnings whatsoever. He just felt another attack, spiritual attack, coming over him. And again, his body temperature dropped. He felt his jawline tightened, as if his face were becoming elongated somehow, and images of wolves not just a wolf, no, plural. Wolves start coming in front of his eyes as if this possession was taking more and more effect of his soul. So he slammed his fist against the steering wheel several times, trying to like stop it and fight back, because you're almost powerless if you're fighting in your own strength and power. What can you do? But no matter what he did, he could not stop this overwhelming feeling of rage and need for violence that just was overtaking him like a madman. He couldn't just stop it. He was just like, I'm just trying to imagine how that would feel like. That would be like a person who was a junkie for years, drug addict, and like tell him or her like out of blue, or going cold turkey, and like they're sweating, they're fighting, that they just can't. It's a struggle. It's horrible. They don't know what's happening. It's stronger than them. So he's like, this is overtaking me. I the same way that drug addicts would need drugs, or the alcoholics would need one more sip, one more bottle. He was like, just need to bite someone. And he was like, well, where is this coming from? That's not me. So he was like, that's it. I'm going back to the hospital just like I did a year ago. There was a nurse at the hospital. Obviously, Billy, they thought that Billy was drunk or crazy, one of the two, if not both. So she was looking around for some backup, because it was like, I can't deal with this guy. He's too much for me. I'm just a nurse. But the emergency room lobby was empty. So Bill was telling her, lady, you don't understand. Not wanting to, but unable to stop himself, Bill reached out with a hand that, again, turned into this claw-like, animalistic hand, if we want to even use that word, and knocked the nurse across the room. She smashed into a row of chairs, falling over them and slamming into the wall. She screamed for help. It's like deja vu, what happened last time, also in the hospital. Before he was just taken to the mental asylum. So he's like, oh my God, like same thing happening. Two patients who had been around the corner came running into the lobby trying to help the nurse. They moved towards Bill, trying to subdue him before he could hurt this young nurse even more. But they couldn't stop Bill. As the men approached him, Bill leaped at them, hurling one into the same chairs that had felled the nurse, and then the other into the reception desk. So now it was not just the nurse, but these two men who were screaming. And I'm thinking about the Book of Acts and the sons of Sceva. This is what happens when you deal with the demonic. This is what happens. You can't subdue it physically unless you're maybe a whole battalion of men, trying to subdue one being, one. It's not even a being. It's like, what if it's a legion? It's another story. So more people, more staff members of the hospital start surrounding Bill, and he was finally seized by the doctors by his shoulders. And Bill turned and started fighting back, and he lifted the doctor at least a foot off the floor and then hurled him into the wall. Again, it's just like in those horror movies. And Bill's rampage continued. He just couldn't control himself. He went into an empty ward and demolished much of the furniture in this blinding frenzy. He grabbed an intern of the hospital by the throat and was starting to choke the man when the police bursted into the room. Bill dropped the intern that he was holding. There were 4 officers, and they formed a sort of a semicircle around Bill, moving slowly because they're scared and trying to be careful. And even with their clubs, it was clear that they were afraid of this snarling, growling man, a wolfman. All 4 of them jumped Bill simultaneously, grabbing him around the neck and torso and trying to subdue him to the best of their abilities. But it wasn't easy because you're not fighting a mere man. Bill got one of the officers by the hair and arm and threw him to the floor. The man was hurled so violent against the floor that he would remain hospitalized for 4 days. So the remaining three officers, they surrounded Bill, and they managed to get him to the floor. Finally, they got handcuffs on his wrists. By this time, the wolf attack was beginning to fade. And this is good in all the stories. Um, when all the symptoms will start fading away, he'll be like, "What is happening? Where am I?" It's like his human side is starting to wake up. He was like, "Where I'm, what I'm doing, where I'm located, who are these people? Did I hurt someone?" And then his consciousness is coming back, and then it's easy for people to overpower him because he's not strong enough anymore. And slowly but surely, Bill came to be regular Bill, normal human being again. And he was looking around the hospital room. It was like, man, there's like so much debris and so many broken chairs and furniture. Everything looked demolished. He was looking at the police officers, those three of them, and like they're all scared. And then he looked at the handcuffs, and he knew, then he realized something terrible happened and he did it, but he couldn't remember what happened. So he started feeling, as always, shame, fear, confusion. And of course, there's images of what to tell to his friends. Everyone will find out what to tell to sweet Abby, Abby that always supported him. How is he going to go back home and spend time with his kids? Like, who is he anyway? It's like, what to do? So they took him to jail that night. And inside the jail, the officers he dealt with were even more grim. He sat in a small room and answered questions for nearly half an hour. He found himself trembling and afraid that he could break down and start crying because he realized what he did. And like, he was sorry, but how to prove to them that wasn't him and that he didn't plan to do that? So the police surgeon came and asked Bill, "Have you been drinking?" Bill said, "No." Then how do you explain what happened in the hospital? So Bill was like, "Oh, I had a seizure." That this was his explanation to try to justify it, because he was, again, like, who trusts in the story that he's turning into a wolf man? Like, no, he didn't want to go back to the asylum. So the doctor asked him, "You had a seizure, so are you epileptic?" "Oh, no." "So then what kind of seizure did you have?" So Bill got even more shy, like what to say. He was even more embarrassed. So he put his head down. And the doctor saw that Bill doesn't want to talk about it. And Bill said, "It's not that I don't want to talk about. I don't know how to talk about it." And the doctor was like, "Come on, I'm a doctor. I heard everything. You can tell me." Bill was like, "No, you never heard something like this." And the doctor was like, "Well, try me." And Bill opened his soul and shared everything with the doctor. So this doctor, the surgeon, said, "Well, have you been in Runwell Mental Asylum before?" Bill said, "Oh, yeah, I did." "Well, how do you feel going back there now?" And the surgeon was like, "Well, yeah, considering everything happening, this would be the best thing for you because they're the only one who can help you. You better go now." So Bill was having dilemma with himself. He was like, "Well, if I go back there, again, everyone will find out. Like, goodbye reputation, goodbye work, goodbye family, goodbye everything that I worked for hard of my whole life." And Bill said, "Well, something is wrong with me." And the doc was, well, he was half sarcastic, half serious. He was like, "Well, that's obvious." He said, "No, no, I mean something is wrong with me that is not ordinary." "You mean delusional? Because you don't seem to be psychotic." The doctors were telling him, "Not from the few tests that we did, but you certainly do seem to be delusional." So Bill looked right at the police surgeon and said, "I can't go back to the mental asylum, I'm afraid." "But why not?" "Because of what my friends will say about me." "Well, you're free to go," they told him, "but the next time you come back here, you won't have any choice, Bill, because it's your second time, you know? If you leave now and you choose not to seek help because you're embarrassed, next time you won't have this option. We're sorry." And the police surgeon was disappointed because Bill chose to leave. And Bill felt embarrassed that he let this man down. He disappointed him. In an interview later with Bill's wife, with Abby, she was asked, what went through your mind that night when the police telephoned you and said that Bill had another attack? Oh, I've been praying so long, and I thought this was behind us because, again, these attacks wouldn't come night after night. Sometimes there would be a year or two or three. So it was peaceful. We were a happy family once again. And they continue interviewing Abby. So they ask her, "Were you afraid of Bill? Being alone, and I mean, ended up hurting, you know, hospital staff and police in two instances within a couple of years. Were you afraid to be alone with Bill at home, especially with kids?" So she said, "Well," and this is again her being such a wonderful spouse. She's like, "I wasn't afraid of Bill. He's a lovely man. But I was afraid of the situation. I didn't think he would harm me, but the way he was behaving with others, well, I wasn't sure about that." He had no idea what he was dealing with here, a man who was afraid that he was turning into a wolf. So I was scared for her. What if he's truly becoming delusional, and if those delusional thoughts overwhelm you, then, well, then God knows what you can do. Because she didn't think he's really turning into a wolf, at least not yet. So the interview went further, and they said, "Well, did you ever consider the possibility that your husband is, sorry to say this, but insane?" And Abby was like, "Well, see, that's the trouble with situation like ours. Anything was possible. You certainly couldn't rule out that he was simply insane, I suppose, but I guess deep down I didn't believe in that. At least she didn't want to believe." And they kept asking her, "Well, how was it then that night when Bill came back from the police station?" And she said, "Oh, how you expect. A little weird at the beginning. Bill was very depressed and ashamed of himself." And I think that's a very good sign because we keep seeing these things that this is not him doing. Otherwise, why would you be so embarrassed of him or of yourself and just like a sweet, kind man that wouldn't step on an insect, but and then here you're like choking people. It's like that's not the same person. It looks like, but it's not the same person. This is a person who's now depressed and embarrassed of his own actions. So that's why she kept having faith in her husband. Bill was afraid of the future. He was like, he doesn't know how often will this keep coming back. He couldn't trust him anymore. What if he hurts more people in the future, especially his family? So the interview continued with Abby, and they're like, "Well, what did you do?" And she said, "Well, that night we did the only thing we could. We went to bed and slept. I told Bill that the sleep was the best medicine." And then she said that she always wondered if Bill's attacks were brought on from fatigue. So in her mind, over the years, this was the most rational, the best answer. Fatigue, stress, anxiety, lack of rest, all of these things. Like, Bill, you're working too much. You're killing yourself with all these jobs and also helping people. You need to stop with all these projects and seriously rest more, enjoy time with your hobbies, with friends and family. And the interviewers asked Abby, "Were you praying at this time?" Well, she said, "Oh, constantly. And Bill and the children pray with me." But life didn't stay safe and sound. And Abby said, "Actually did, at least for a while." And then the problem was back? The interview asked. And she said, "Oh, yeah, worse than ever." Uh, Sean, before I continue with worse attacks, do you want to comment on anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that he's not the one who's doing it, and not only that, but when he's realizing it's coming on, he's seeking help. So he's trying to get the help that he needs, and it must be just frustrating when he's like, "Hey, look, I'm turning into a wolf." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, you're drunk." And so then he's got to pull out the skibbity pap and smack her across the boom. I wonder if he's actually turning into a cat. 'Cause he's like, boom. uh, but no, it's like when he's in control, he's really like trying to seek help, and that will continue to be a thing that we see is when he knows that he's in trouble, he's going to try to get to the place where he thinks that they can help. Um, and yeah, nobody really can help because nobody knows what's going on. Um, it's also, telling that once he starts regaining control of himself, he's not resisting. He's, the people who are trying to subdue him, he's not fighting against them. He's calm and relaxed. Um, it kind of, I mean, really sucks for him that the wolf is there to cause the problems and then leaves for him to deal with the consequences. So, like you said, he's in the hospital and he's looking around like, man, someone should clean this mess up. Who did that? Well, you did, you know. And I just, like you said, I think it's just a testament to the kind of woman that Abby is, that she's willing to, stand by him, um, even when he is going through this. That she's able to, um, you know, she knows him so well that she's able to say, look, this isn't him, there's something else going on. Which is, I mean, that's just a testament to her as a woman.
And not just any woman, woman of God. And if people will say, well, this is silly, this is too supernatural for me, that's fine. We're not saying this truly happened. We don't know. But imagine if this wasn't about something supernatural and paranormal and a human turning into a wolf man or whatever. Imagine this was his relapse into drugs or alcohol. There was a faithful woman who stayed there despite risking of being hurt, injured, attacked by her own husband, believing in him there's still good left in him so much, continuing to build home with three kids and her husband, and hoping, the future will be brighter and better, praying, waiting, encouraging him, believing in him. Man, such a wonderful woman. So going back to the story, 2 years have passed, and here in the story, the Warrens are introducing us to this Lauren lady who was a full-time prostitute, and how she got involved with Bill Wilson. Find out. So it was a nighttime. It's always a nighttime, and it was July, so not even fall, 1987. So a few years after this, couple of years. And Bill was going home with his company van, and he was like, I'll drop off my coworkers because, I mean, look, putting aside all these crazy manifestations, demonic manifestations, and hurting people, he was a good guy. He was a good husband, good father, good coworker, good employee, good everything. Not perfect, but good. So he was like, let me drop my coworkers. And it was a hot midnight again, end of July, and Bill was thirsty from working so hard all day. So he was like, let me have a quick pint of beer. No biggie. A few hours later, he was admittedly drunk and worried about being picked up by a policeman. So for this reason, he chose to take another driving route, so he wouldn't be caught. A place that will be more in the wilderness, so to speak, but safer, where usually cops don't go. So as Bill was driving, he saw Lauren, this prostitute, walking along the street, and decided to get her in the van. At which point he would place her under citizen's arrest and take her to the nearby police station. That was his story. Lauren tells a different story. Well, yeah, I was walking along the street. It was late and dark, and that always makes me nervous. And then I sensed this car cruising along slowly behind me. I turned around and saw the van. I could barely make out the man's face. I wonder if he was looking for a woman. He seemed to have something else in his mind. I don't know. But the van stayed right on my heels, she said, as it were. And the man's inside was staring at me. So she was wondering about running, but then you can't run in heels, and he has a car. I mean, there's no one to help you. Where can you run? So the van surged around, not around, but ahead of her, and pulled over to the curb. So it was obvious to her. She was like, okay, there's something happening here, and this is a decent looking man. So maybe he just wants fun, and I'm a prostitute. So, maybe that's all what he wants. Um, So he asks Lauren to enter the car to get inside with him. Lauren still felt a little bit uneasy. She was like, I don't wanna, I just don't know this guy. He feels a little bit strange. So she turned and started walking away, but he called her back. Reluctantly, she went. She entered the car, and she was like, "Oh, she was giving him benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's a customer. Maybe she's shy. Maybe he's shy. Maybe he's introverted. Maybe he's weird a little bit. Whatever." So she tried to be polite. She smiled at him. They were like engaging in a conversation. So she asked Bill. It was like, "Well, what do you have on your mind?" Since she thought you're doing the business, right? And Bill said, "Oh, I think you know." And she was like, "Oh, yeah, he's just thinking about that thing. So it's like, all is well. We'll just finish and I'll just go home and he'll go his home." So she started smiling and, being more relaxed. But as they were driving, she was noticing the environment and she was like, "Where are you taking me?" And Bill didn't want to talk. He was just driving. And then she started panicking. And she said, "I want out. Stop the car." And he said, "I'm placing you under citizen's arrest." And she said, "For what?" "Because you're too young to be a prostitute." And Lauren said, "You're crazy." And then she saw the police parking lot and she said, "Oh, you are actually being serious. And I was afraid you would do something to me." And he says, "Yeah, I'm serious. You're being arrested. So I'm dropping you at the police lot." And Bill said after this incident, he said that he just had this idea of driving Lauren to the police station. He just had this urge. He didn't know what he was doing. His excuse was like, "Oh, you're not supposed to be a prostitute. You're too young." But that wasn't his right motive in his heart. So he said, maybe I was secretly afraid that I would harm her. So the human part of me, not the wolf part of me, be would think ahead and plan, be strategic, and take her to the police station. And then once when I start turning into a wolf, if I do because I'm feeling weird, then I won't attack her. She'll be safe. So you can see how he was thoughtful. He was a good guy. So they came to the police station. A few moments later, Bill stopped the car, and Lauren said, "Okay, I'm going to go out." And Bill said, "Yeah, you do that." And she said, "Okay, I'll go and get a policeman." And as she was leaving, Bill turned his head towards her and glared at her. She put her foot down on the pavement, and then out of blue, Bill reached out for her, but it was too late. Now she was running away from the van because his wolf nature started kicking in. So his human side was like, "Yeah, just go," thinking, "Be safe, just go." But then when the wolf nature, the demonic nature of him saw her leaving, he started reaching towards her like, "No, like, come back." Like he wanted to hurt her. So as he was fighting and with himself and having dilemmas, he didn't immediately go after her. He was there listening to her footsteps as she was rushing towards the station. He didn't know what to think, what to do. Every few minutes, he would feel like this rumbling growl again, the old thing that would come back before he would turn into wolf. Just coming from his belly to his chest and then coming out his mouth. And he's like, "Oh no, it's happening again." And he's trying to block it by not thinking, but this wolf imagery is coming back to his mind more and more. And he was like, "Oh, I'm starting to change. There's nothing I can do." And then he opened the door and stepped down. He began walking slowly towards the police station. The growl was starting to work up through his chest again. He felt his whole body, tense, as if it were anticipating a terrible change of some kind. So he walked towards a policeman. And this is where weird things are happening. We're now, excuse me, meeting Brad Busby, who was a police officer, actually a police vet that night. He was a big guy, powerful guy, formidable body, went through so many fights, many incidents, criminal activities in his life. I mean, stopping them, preventing them, had minimum fear. He was a skilled man, experienced man. So Brad Busby, policeman, says that several officers and I were inside the precinct when we saw this young woman coming through the back door and asking for help. And they went outside seeing like, well, who is after her? And they took dogs with themselves. Dogs start going wild, barking like crazy. And then they saw Bill Ramsey. He was just a few feet from the van. And he was like mesmerized. Not mesmerized, but like paralyzed. He was just like a statue, like standing there looking at them, not moving, not talking. So cops are like, oh, we've seen this before. He's just a drunk guy. And they wanted to communicate to Bill, but Bill didn't want to talk. He was just like there was nothing inside of him, dead. He was just looking at them, but he didn't talk. They tried to ask him for a name and try, and finally he said, yeah, my name is Bill Ramsey. And they're like, Bill, this lady's complaining that something's happening with you and she's afraid for her life. Why don't you come inside so we can talk with you? Silence again. And as Brad, the policeman, is saying, he says, I put out my hand to take Bill's elbow and guide him to the station, but he jerked away from me, very angry. And by now, he was muttering things to himself, and no one could understand what. Behind him now, the dogs were barking furiously, very upset. They're like, about to break the chains and just go and, attack Bill. And then the policeman continues his story. He says, but when I touched his elbow again, he once more jerked away. And then this kind of low rumbling started up his chest and rose to his throat. And the policeman thought like, oh, when the sound started coming out from Bill's body, they said, oh, this roar is coming from dogs. But they're like, no, this is coming from Bill, from this guy that we think he's just drunk. And then Bill started attacking them. His face underwent this incredible transformation. His eyes got especially crazy. His lip pulled back over his teeth, and his hands suddenly became like claws. He was tearing at a policeman the way any wild animal would, as if he was trying to rend his flesh. And Brad is saying, like, dude, look at me. I'm a big man. I'm a strong one. I'm a police vet. I'm not easily afraid. I've been dealing with drunk people, with aggressive people my whole life. But this is not that. This is different. I couldn't make Bill Ramsey slow. I couldn't calm him down. We were wrestling on the ground, and he kept clawing at me and ripping at me. The amazing thing was that he kept getting stronger the longer we wrestled on the ground. His anger was starting to take its toll. I could feel him starting to do real damage to me, policeman admits, especially to my back, as he pounded me again and again and again against the ground. And then he started choking me and putting his claws around my throat and starting to strangle me. And the policeman says, I could literally feel life leaving my body. He was helpless. He couldn't do anything against Bill. He was bigger in his body, naturally bigger, but Bill was overwhelmed by something supernatural, and no one could help policemen in this position. I mean, in this situation. So the policeman was like, that's it. I'm dying. Goodbye world, goodbye life. This is it. This is my last night. So the fear overwhelmed the policeman, and he was losing consciousness. And then Bill starts screaming like crazy. He says, when the devil is in me, I'm strong. And he was chanting this repeatedly over and over again. When the devil is in me, I'm strong. It was like a religious chant. And the longer he was saying that, the stranger his face was getting, especially his eyes. And he was becoming more stronger. It was like full demonic possession. There's blackness that started swimming before policeman's eyes. He was like, and chills started overwhelming him, like this deep terror. It's not just dying, but like, what is this monstrosity? What is this? His voice was also changing. Everything was changing. Like, who is this man? Two officers came to help Busby, and they managed to put him away. And then six officers attempted to take Bill Ramsey down and hold him so that the police surgeon could inject him with sedative. But not even six men were able to hold Bill Ramsey down, because this was the most powerful transformation or possession since Bill was 9 and started manifesting these characteristics of this wolf-like demon. So the police surgeon, who was like shouting, he was like, "Hey, send more men, send more men, send more men." So another six officers came, and there were like dozen officers trying to subdue Bill. Dogs are getting even more crazy. They're frantic. That's it. Like they're like screaming like they're in some mortal pain because what they're sensing about Bill, or actually what is in him, what possessed him. So imagine a dozen police officers circling Bill. He's growling, he's crouching, and the curling paws of his hand now are convinced even more officers they were looking at a wolfman, or maybe something they would call werewolf. And one officer supposedly gave a testimony. He said, "Oh, I never had any doubt that we were dealing with a werewolf, because what we all saw that night, we never seen something like that ever." Second officer said that not even the sedative worked. That was the scariest part for this second officer. So the surgeon said that they had to give him another injection. And in the meantime, Bill Ramsey hurt several of the officers. And after the first injection, they managed to weaken him a little bit so that they were just able to put him inside the station. That's it, not to overtake him. But as soon as they got him inside the station, he began snarling again, snapping at the officers, growling again, just like Wolf. So the police officer didn't know what to do and didn't want to shoot at him. So they got all the pillows they could find and started pushing in his face so that he wouldn't be able to bite them anymore. So they were like just trying to do anything they could to subdue him so that the surgeon would still have 5 seconds, space to safely inject him with another set of sedative. So the first officer, when he was giving an interview, he said, as soon as the doctor injected him, Bill Ramsey went into another seizure of some kind. He kept throwing himself around on the jail cot, trying to get free, and he made these deep guttural sounds that disturbed everyone who heard them. The second officer said he finally became unconscious, Bill, about 10 minutes after the surgeon's second sedative took hold. Bill himself tells it this way, after he went back being Bill. He said, I kept trying to fight a sedative. Even in the heat of the moment, I knew that they were trying, that they were going to do one more time to inject the sedative. I knew where I would wake up, and this time there would be no talking my way out of it. I knew that I would wake up at Runwell Mental Hospital. And then there's a lengthy interview with, well, it's actually not that lengthy, but it's an interview that it's interesting, but for the sake of time and my voice will skip it. But they had an interview with this Sergeant Brad Busby, who was so triggered and by this traumatic experience. It wasn't so much physical damage and injuries and pain that he suffered. He said this left big trauma on him, that he had to quit being a policeman and retire. He just couldn't deal with this because he would think about Bill and think about werewolf or the wolfman coming after him, and he was just going through these PTSD moments. He was like, that's it, I'm quitting, I'm retiring, I can't deal with this anymore. So that's kind of the effect it left on Bill. I want to skip a big chunk of the book and just after you give your comment to deal with the exorcism, with the last part of the book. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, yeah, it just goes to show the brutal strength of the demonic. I mean, that's one of the four signs that an exorcist looks for. You know, like what we said in the last episode. It's knowledge of things that are supposedly unknowable, being able to speak in an unlearned tongue, having supernatural strength, and having an aversion to holy objects. And so, yeah, that's one of the signs that an exorcist looks for is that supernatural type of strength. Um, I I don't know if I believe Bill's account with the prostitute, right? Like for me when I read that I was like, sure. Like that was your plan. Okay. Um yeah, to me that whole thing was just weird. That he went to pick up this prostitute, she was getting creeped out by him. He was like, get in the van, and then, oh yeah, I'm gonna take you to the police station because you shouldn't be a prostitute. Bruh, nah, I think you just got cold feet and you're a creep. But yeah, I think that it's really interesting toward the end there where he's talking about the wolf was trying to stay in power with, because he had already had one injection of Thorazine and they were going to give him the second one, but then at the end he was trying to stay awake, and it's almost like he was willing the wolf power in order to stay awake, because if not he knew where he was going to wake up. And so there's this dichotomy, or maybe it's not like a symbiotic relationship that we haven't seen yet, in Bill and the Wolf. That
Oh, that's
even
like the movie Venom. Have you
yeah,
seen Venom?
yeah,
That's it.
yeah. It's like this weird relationship where he can contribute, or at least he's aware enough that he can contribute some of his own will to what's going on, um, which isn't something we've seen before. But then again, this is also a level of transformation that we hadn't seen before. So it is interesting.
So we're skipping a big chunk of the book. Um, him going finally to the mental asylum, his wife being more scared, um, this demonic attacks manifesting more and more often in Bill's life, and then Ed and Lorraine Warren, the most famous American couple demonologists, heard about Bill. They happened to be in England doing some other business, and they managed to meet Bill and say, "Hey, look, we'll cover the coast. We'll find people who will find your travel to America. We want to introduce you to Bishop. I think it was McKenna. He's a well trained and experienced exorcist. We want to help you because what we believe is you're not cursed, Bill. You're actually possessed by this wolf like entity, a powerful demon, just like you were saying, Shaun." And he was hesitant. He needed weeks to think, to talk to his wife, saying, "Man, like, who are these people, Ed and Warren? Like, can't even believe them." But then his wife was like, "This is your last hope, Bill." He was already manifesting more and more. His wife was getting scared, and they're like, "Yeah, you have to go to the States." So they finally made that leap. They met Bishop McKenna, and soon we'll switch to the part of where when the exorcism started. But I just want to say it's very interesting and scary, unfortunately for Abby, his wife, how just before the exorcism, these spiritual attacks multiplied to the point where he will be attacking his wife. He attacked before that, attacks would be like once in a year or two, or sometimes even three. But now they start happening like almost night after night, or night after like, and then a few more nights after that, they will repeat. So when they came to the States for the exorcism, he attacked his wife twice and she barely survived. And the way, and it's an emotional story, the way she supposedly managed to prevent his attacks is telling him, Bill, I love you. Bill, I love you. Bill, I love you. And it's like the real person, the real man, Bill, that would somehow penetrate his ears, and he would fight the demon, and he would like, I'm killing my wife, I better stop. It happened 2 times, and then he would go back to bed, he would wake up, he wouldn't even remember what was happening. And his wife was trying to protect him because they're focusing on exorcism. And again, what a wonderful woman. I don't know if they're still alive, but I was like, man, every other woman, and he admitted, he said this many times, I didn't deserve Abby. Every other woman would go. Who want to stay with me? I'm crazy. I'm aggressive. I'm not safe for anyone. And people are laughing behind my back. Like, I'm losing friends. I'm losing jobs. Like, no, but she stayed with him through everything. So yeah, they came to the States. They met Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they met this bishop. And Bishop was preparing, instruments and stuff like holy water, crucifix, and stuff like that for the exorcism. And then he was praying in Latin, so the ritual began. And there were also some press people there from the magazine called The People, and those are the newspaper people that actually paid for Bill Ramsey's plane ticket to come from London to the States because they want to cover the story. So now Ed is talking, the demonologist. He says, I could sense Bill becoming very troubled the moment we came to the church. The demonic spirit within him was trying desperately to keep Bill under his control. So Bill looked very weak. And again, he's coming from the night where he was about to kill his wife, but her love prevented him. So he was coming from a night where he didn't even sleep much. He was pale. He was weak. He was like, and the spirit inside of him was resisting going to the church because the spirit knew what was about to happen. And as Bill was approaching the church, the altar, Bishop McKenna approached him and demanded the demon inside Bill to identify itself and to leave Bill. And Bill was just there staring at the bishop. He was like, oh, nothing is happening. This is like one of those B horror movies. This is gonna fail, and I have no other hope, no other help. No one can help me. This was my help. That's why I came to the States. So he was even smiling when the bishop started to shout in Latin and started doing exorcism. There was nothing. Actually, it was funny to Bill. Bishop McKenna said that he could feel and see that something that Bill couldn't. The demonic spirit inside Bill was beginning to fight. It was going to be a struggle, but right from the start, the bishop felt that exorcism would be successful. So he felt this kind of optimism that he doesn't usually have. And it will be a slow process sometimes, just like the story we covered last Friday. Sometimes this exorcism that can last for weeks. So the bishop testified that he's seen dope addicts going to withdrawal, and that all he could have thought at that moment was that Bill started trashing around in his chair, reminding him of those people who'll be dealing with drugs. So the bishop said that Bill didn't know, but at that point he was fighting the demon for the control of his body and soul. The bishop could see his face phase into and out of its wolf look. One moment he will be a man, another moment he will be a wolf. So Bill was giving his best to try to fight this demon. And then the bishop admits, he says, this can leave such a physical toll on your body. If you're not in good physical shape, and this is why before they even started exorcism, they told Bill to go and do the heart checkup, if he's healthy enough to go through exorcism. Bishop said, like, sometimes people don't even survive this very beginning of exorcism. They, if their heart is not healthy, they simply die. They pass away. Bill continued to shake and just uncontrollably. He was having an attack, the worst one he had ever known. And again, this manifestation of turning into a wolf, where his lip would pull back from his teeth. He felt his hand becoming claws. He felt this unmistakable urge to attack the bishop, and he did. His hands reached out and attempted to rip open Bishop's face. But that's why Bishop, because he had experience with people attacking him, he had two off-duty policemen who jumped to grab Bill. The exorcism was going well, and he didn't want to spoil, so he told policemen to stay away unless it's getting really, bad for his, for his life. The bishop then brought a crucifix from somewhere inside his religious garments and pushed the 214 cross into Bill's face. Now, Shaun, do you know what is 214 cross? Are you familiar with something like that?
No, I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, I don't know what that is. A 214 cross. Man. No, I mean, maybe I see. I don't even know if it would be like a style of cross, because why would you include? Why would you include? I mean, there are different styles of crosses, especially in the West. In the East, they typically have the three-pronged cross, and that's kind of what they're known for, and all that. In the West, they use the cross. They also use St. Peter's cross, St. Andrew's cross. They use all different kinds of crosses, but I'm not sure what a 214 cross is.
Okay. Well, while you're talking, I managed to find something interesting. Can you see my screen being shared?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me enlarge this a little bit. Okay. Memorial Crucifix 214 for $76. Exceptional quality brass crucifix, ideal for outdoor monuments. So it's not only for exorcism, manufactured in Greece. Looks very nice. I wonder why is it called 214? Maybe because the ending of the the label is 214. That's the only thing I can think about. And in the category of funeral and cemetery. Yeah. Interesting. Well, at least we learned something new. Oh, and there are different type of crucifixes. 204, 223, 250. Okay, they're just different shapes and looks. Okay. I was just curious.
It's interesting that it says Frankish friar's crucifix. I find that interesting that it would be Frankish, and then we found out that Bishop McKenna is a what do they call him, a traditionalist Catholic. So he's one that broke away from the Roman Catholic Church because of Vatican II. So yeah, it's just interesting that he's using a Frankish cross. Maybe that's some sort of there's some sort of imagery there with it being a Frankish cross instead of like a Roman cross.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, that's the cross that Bishop McKenna pushed into Bill's face, and the werewolf or the wolfman, the wolf entity, this demon inside Bill went berserk. He came up from his chair, snarling and growling and grasping at the bishop. Abby started screaming, his wife. She said it was hard to believe that. Man, I'm looking at this wolf, man, this possessed entity. And I'm looking at the body that is possessed. That's my husband. And I love my husband, and it's hard for me to believe that my husband will be his old self before he turned 9 and before he became possessed. and that he'll be the one that I can actually continue loving and build my family, and believe that he'll be harmless and cured, and that this wolf imager will never be there. And this is very normal thought of process. I mean, very normal chain of thoughts, because you're seeing your husband who is possessed and hurting people, and before that she only witnessed that by hearing stories back in England, and twice herself being attacked. This was the first time that she saw that he was actually attacking someone else. And for her observing, it was terrifying because, hey, we're about to go back to England. What will happen to us? Can I still be with this man? I love him, but will this continue happening? So these are the normal thoughts that anyone would go through these emotions, and just dealing with this mental images, and trying to fight for your husband or for your wife. So the next time when Bill jumped and left his chair and started heading towards the bishop to attack him again, this time the priest had no choice but to retreat beyond the altar gate. Bill was just there's like a foam like coming out his mouth, eyes completely wild. He began to rush through the gate for the bishop, but the priest stood absolutely still, and I can salute him for that, holding his cross up once again and beginning to speak in Latin. And then something started happening at this time. Bill started feeling weak. He went back to the chair and threw himself in it as if he was losing energy. He could feel the coldness in his body begin to warm. And as he felt the desire to attack the bishop was fading away. And Bill was marveling after that when he was giving the interview. He was saying, as I was sitting there in the chair, I felt myself becoming purified. That's the word he used, purified. The poison that has been in his body, and he used that word poison, was draining him completely. And then he said, and I was left without any strength at all. The werewolf's power was slipping quickly away. There was a faint roar sounded in Bill's chest and then faded. He brought up his hands, but they were no longer claw-like. They were merely hands, normal human hands. And a few days later, the Warrens took Bill and Asby Ramsey to the airport. They stayed in touch. They became friends. And Bill said, and I wanted to remember this, so I highlighted, Bill said, I had been freed from my prison. So the exorcism finished. Story has a good ending. I was honestly expecting exorcism to be longer, maybe to last whole day or days, like with the previous story we covered on Friday, with maybe some blood and some levitation and some speaking in tongues and some crazy fights, just like Bill was doing for years back in England. I have a couple of questions if you want to just briefly wrestle with them, and then we'll be done for tonight. One of them is like, why are Catholics even doing exorcism in Latin? As if Latin has more power during exorcism over demonic powers than any other language. Second thing is, at the beginning, we don't see any effect on the wolf-like demon that possessed Bill. And then as the demon in Bill was trying to attack Bishop McKenna over and over again, then finally prayers and rebuke started functioning, and then Bill went back to the chair, and eventually the demon left him. Seems kind of too fast. It seems kind of the spirit, which was very powerful and present in Bill's life for most of his life, didn't fight for that long, or seems as a very powerful entity, because it took 12 officers to subdue Bill when he was possessed. I honestly expected more from an entity of that power. Especially, we're going back to the beginning when you said this was like an ancient deity or ancient demon. So if you want to maybe address why Latin, I know it's tradition, but like there's nothing special about Latin more than English or Serbian or Polish or German, whatever. But the second thing is like, was this exorcism kind of too fast and nothing impressive compared to the story we covered last Friday that lasted like 3 weeks? So, what are your thoughts on this concluding part when we are dealing with exorcism?
Okay, so why Latin? Well, as we said, Bishop McKenna is a traditionalist Catholic, which means that he broke off at Vatican II. So he no longer stayed part of the Roman Catholic Church. Some of the restructuring that they did in Vatican II was that the Mass would be said in the vulgar tongue of the people. And so, because he wasn't part of that group, he schismed off of that group. He maintains and retains all of his rituals in Latin, which is the original language for the Western Church. Today, exorcists are free to use either the Latin or the vulgar tongue for the versions, and that some people think that the Latin's more effective. Some people think that speaking in the native language of the people is more effective. Um, but yeah, it's really up to the exorcist. Um, I think that maybe the idea of using Latin is that it is the language of the Western Church, and it has been the language of the Western Church for so long. It feels maybe to the priest more like, instead of you're praying in a position where you're kind of pulling from the church, it's more like you're praying with the church, that the whole church is praying in this Latin tongue. Um, that would just be my own assumption of why they do it. But yeah, the reason that McKenna was doing it is specifically because he rejected the reforms that that made the rituals able to be spoken in the native tongue of the people. Um, then, as far as why the demon waited to manifest, we know that demons don't really want to be. They want to kind of try to hide. They don't want to be known for what they are, because if that's the case, then people will try to get rid of them. So, in the presence of a priest, they'll try to hide who they are. Even it, exorcist Carlos Martins says that they will like send out lackey demons to face the exorcist. The higher ranked demons will kind of hide back in the background, and you kind of have to get through some of the lackey demons before you can get to the higher ranked ones. Why the exorcism was so quick? Well, I think that it's because the demon had no right to be there. There was nothing legally that gave him entry right. Like I said, Bill was 9. It wasn't like he, committed any grave sin. There wasn't any sort of like wound on his soul that allowed this demon to attach to him. I think the demon just didn't have any. He didn't have any purchase on Bill to be able to stake a claim. So once the church started praying for him to go, then the demon had to leave. No matter how powerful the demon was, um, he had no right to be there.
Well, I just want to say hi to our friends, Troy and Joshua Davidson. I'm sorry you guys came by the end. We've been doing this for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and you came now, like literally 1 minute before we're about to finish with the episode. But yeah, this was an interesting case of William Bill Ramsey and his the werewolf or wolf-like demon that attached to Bill since he was 9, and then thank God much later in his life, despite everything he went through, he got free. He went through this um, experience of exorcism. He had to move temporarily from England to the States, get help, and finally he was restored. I don't know if they're still alive. I would wish and hope they are. Maybe that way I can maybe try to find them and maybe talk to them or whatever. But it was a really thrilling adventure, like really turbulent story filled with sadness, with aggression, with with police activity when even 12 policemen couldn't subdue Bill when he was possessed. Um, Nurses, doctors, you know, trying to sedate him and put him to sleep. Police dogs going crazy after him. Him attacking his friends, even wife, and not remembering anything. Going to a mental asylum. Poor man going through all of this and finally being free. And I liked how the book ends is that Ed and Lorraine Warren, the demonologist couple, they stay in touch. They became friends with Abby and with Bill Ramsey. And just before the book was published in the 80s, um, they checked with them again to see if there was wolf reaction or the demon coming back. It never came back. And then the book was published, so we don't know after that what was happening. But seemingly the story has a happy ending. And it reminds me at the beginning of the story when Bill started experiencing these demonic attacks in his young adult life. He would see that image of the church, and that would give him comfort, like, oh, God is with me, God is with me, God is with me, I'm not alone, I'm not abandoned. That would give him comfort. And even though despite everything he went through, he was hopeless, he was like, I'm ashamed of myself, I've been attacking people I don't even remember. I'm like, there are claws coming out my hands, like they're like these big feet, forming in my jaw, like there's this growl and like animalistic sounds coming from my chest. I don't remember anything, but that image of the church, even though, you know, maybe for a season he forgot it because he was depressed and he was like, there's no help. I don't want to hurt my wife and kids. That happened almost to be prophetic, almost prophetic. What he witnessed earlier came later to be true because he also got exorcism in the church, although in the States, not in England where he was from. But it's such a fascinating story. And of course, just like we said at the beginning of the podcast, we have no clue what is true. We have no clue. The three possible scenarios: nothing was true, everything was true, or like the skeleton of the story, the core of the story is true with exaggerated and added elements. I don't know what is true, but it's a very interesting story. And I honestly enjoyed covering it. Let me just see what Troy says. He says, there's something in the ontology of humanity that allows us to synergistically, of course, Troy has to use difficult word for a foreigner like me, synergistically participate and embody spiritual beings. A purpose to participate in the incarnation of God can also incarnate evil. I have no clue what he said. I'll just say amen, brother, and that's it. I'll just deal with that. I'm not of that IQ level. I would just ask Joshua Davison, the golden lips, not to say something even more wiser, because then I will feel dumb. So don't do it. Don't do it. Shaun, any concluding thoughts? Oh, and by the way, this Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time, I'm welcoming back our dear podcast friend, archaeologist from Canada, Dr. David E. Graves. He'll be telling us more New Testament New Testament archaeology. He'll be sharing some slides and stuff. So I'm very excited about that episode. Shaun, you have the concluding part. What is your overall impression? How is there even a way to find out how much of this is true?
I mean, other than just doing your own research and trying to find the people that are referenced and see, I mean, so supposedly it says in the story that there is a videotape of the interview with the police officer. Um, so you'd have to just do your own research. But if we're just going to take it on faith that they're being honest and that the account, to the best of their ability, is accurate, then we've really unpacked here what it is that we think happened and how it is that happened and how we can make sense of it in our Christian worldview. And really, that's the whole purpose of this. Not to go through and see what's real and what's not, but to say, hey, if we took this whole story as it sits, how can we make sense of that as Christians? And so I think that we've done a great job of that. The piece that I want to leave for my final thought is the thing that you cued on, the prophetic image of the church in bathing in the light of the full moon. And to me that was so powerful because it says that even in the midst of this, the full moon representing, of course, the this transformation, the loss of power, even in the midst of this, the church still stands. Even in the midst of this, God is still there, right? And yes, exactly. And Christ is victorious. So even in this, I can have hope and faith because God is still with me. And so I think that that was Bill's takeaway, and that should be our takeaway from this. No matter what it is that you're going through, no matter what kind of storm of life that you're forced to endure, God is still there. He's still with you, and he can endure anything, which means that with him, you can endure anything because ultimately you're safe in him. The storms of this life don't matter. The worst thing they can do is just send you home.
Well, amen. Thank you for that wonderful conclusion. We did overstate. Man, I was hoping we'll be done by hour and 30 and 45, but there are so many cool aspects of his life and scary, and we skipped even a lot. But yeah, thank you for being with us. If you watch live, praise God. If not, you can watch this whenever, wherever. If you find any of our episode material blessing to you or interesting to you, your congregation, family, friends, please share our material, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not even asking for money or anything of that sort. So please keep helping and supporting our modest ministry channel. That being said, God bless you. I'll see you this Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time, and next Friday, Shaun and I will be back. Take care.